presentations of the semester. We're really thrilled to have Jane Thrailkill from UNC. She has been a colleague here at Duke in all kinds of important ways for years, giving talks in different departments, and she really has a following at Duke and has also helped us to create new connections to Chapel Hill, which turned out to be a step ahead of us. At the same moment that we were proposing the Health Humanities Lab, it turns out that they had already gotten their Health Humanities Lab up and running. And that makes this a real corridor of health humanities collaboratories. And we are also a part of the Consortium of Humanities Centers and Institutes Medical Humanities Network. So that's another way that we are working not only regionally, but nationally and globally. So Jane is Bowman and Gordon Gray Distinguished Term Associate Professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She's trained as a literary scholar and works on the relationship between literature and science in broad terms. Her first book is Affecting Fictions, Mind, Body, and Emotion in American Literary Realism, at University Press in 2007. And she is finishing a second monograph on the play-based philosophies of the James siblings, obviously very interested in health humanities as we now construe them, Alice, William, and Henry. Since 2015 and 2016, she has been directing the MA concentration in literature, medicine, and culture, and she is co-director of HIVE, which is the name of their Health Humanities Lab, housed in the Department of English and Comp Lit. And this summer, I was in Kingston at the CHCI Medical Humanities Summer Institute and heard this talk, and I was just blown away by its creativity and its bold, daring sort of challenge of orthodoxies. And this is the core of a short monograph that she's writing called The Agonies of Empathy in U.S. Medical Education. And I hope that this talk will really continue to be given in many different environments and start to influence medical education. I also want to mention that one of her associates, Kim Weed, was also presenting at that King's College Summer Institute and did fabulous work. So I wish that we could have you also presenting, but maybe during the Q&A you can tell us something about the studies that you've been doing with Jane Thrailkill. So welcome, Jane.
Thank you. So I have apparatus on me. Can you hear me because of it? Am I mic'd? Do I need to? Oh, it's only for that? Okay, well, it's okay. I talk loud. So, Deborah, thank you. I'm delighted to be here today. I'm grateful to Sarah Rogers, Sarah, Eric, Thomas, who made all the electricity things go together, and these guys did the heavy lifting with publicity and so on. I also have to do a shout out to Kim Weed. I'm glad Deborah mentioned the incredible work that she is doing as part of Hive Lab. She's coordinator of one of our most important studies, to my mind, which is, we call it the Falls Narrative Study. And she has worked with a robust, delightful team of undergrads over at UNC to talk with older adults about experiences they've had falling down, which, sidebar, New York Times, #1 risk, right, to older adults' health. Anyway, she's right now working, she coordinated the study, she helped to envision the study, and now she's working on crunching the data. I like saying that. The data being the stories that the older adults produced, but also the data are the reflections of the undergraduates who were a part of the study. So this is a secret of Hive Lab, which is to say, if it looks like we're doing this, we're also doing that. There's always multiple layers of inquiry that are happening at every level. Okay, I tend to be undisciplined in many different ways, so I'm actually going to really try to dig down and read this. Oh, how do I click it? You're going to click it?
Sure.
Do you need, here, I can give you a copy of the talk, and you will see where to click, I think. Anyway, we'll see.
Figure that.
One thing I should say about Hive Lab is it is, I mean, in the context of both the university and things like the medical school, it takes the hierarchy, right, and puts it on its side. So we have an incredible horizontal field of inquiry. So we have graduate students, we have undergrads, we have postdocs, we have colleagues from all over the university who participate. That's kind of a core, how to say it, the medium is the message to some extent, or the form echoes the content. Anyway, so it's heartening to look out and to see so many colleagues and students from not just different parts of campus, arts and sciences, medicine, but, as Deborah said, from either side of the 15501 corridor. In the same year, 2015, both UNC and Duke opened Health Humanities Labs, the first of their kind in the nation. I like saying that, and so far nobody has corrected me, so I'm calling it, empirically true. Regarding the lovely Health Humanities Lab serendipity, Duke UNC, I will skip the lame analogy about athletics, which on our side, don't know about yours, is incredibly shameful right now. And I will just affirm my optimism that UNC and Duke are and will continue to be out front in teaching the next generation of students in the humanities and in the sciences, who collaboratively, these students, will transform what healthcare is and what it can do to live up to its essential mission: to palliate human suffering. Boom. Okay, click. The links I wish to explore today between the work of clinicians and the work of scholars, between healthcare and the humanities, between the aspirations of the sciences and the aims of the liberal arts, these all pivot on the word doctor. Here is the first definition of doctor in the Oxford English Dictionary. Note that it is not physician or healer of the sick or authority on questions of life and death. The first definition is a teacher, instructor. Note, too, that there is no mention of institutions, of credentials, of titles or years of education or field of expertise or level of distinction or educational venue or place within a hierarchy of or number of Google Scholar citations. Instead, we see something pure and beautiful, one who gives instruction. Note, however, an ominous two words at the end of this definition, words that are italicized, now rare. This serves as a koan for me. A koan is a riddle or puzzle that Zen Buddhists use during meditation to help them unravel greater truths about the world and about themselves. Now rare, of course, points to the fact that when we say the word doctor, most in this room and in the US have a fleeting mental image that looks something like this. But our koan has led me to meditate on something else, on what we are teaching our medical students, on what we are teaching our pre-med students, and what we are teaching our students, full stop. What are we teaching our children? Click. That, of course, was Michelle Obama's question yesterday in the speech she gave at the rally in Manchester. That is the question we all need to be asking the day after the architect of No Child Left Behind program was installed as the president of the North Carolina University system, a shining star, historically. in public higher education in the US. Yesterday, Margaret Spellings was installed in what I would call a star chamber-like ceremony at UNC's Memorial Hall. This installation happened yesterday. How many of you were there? How many of you knew about it beforehand? You knew about it. There are a lot of UNC people in this room. Now rare. This says to me that real teaching that affects and creates transformations in all directions, is an endangered species. So, when distilled to its essence, my talk today and the work that my colleagues and students and partners and I are doing at UNC's Hive Lab is focused on teaching and transformation. In the context of medical or health humanities, we merge this imperative with the core, though often overlooked, imperative of healthcare, the alleviation of suffering, the renewal of livable, though likely changed, personhood, and the restoration of beauty. Not just life, beauty. I think I need a slide. Yeah, there, him. And to add an important addition, which I lift from Ray Barfield's talk at Hive Lab 2 nights ago, all this work must respond to the persons involved. Quote, the alleviation of suffering must be motivated at the behest of the individual's story. But aren't I telling you something that we already know? Haven't we all agreed that we are getting there? That health humanism is no longer an oxymoron? Indeed. The narrative of health humanities can most certainly be told as a story of perseverance and triumph. In the US and in the UK, there's escalating pressure for an increase in humanism in clinical care and thus in medical training. Biomedicine now embraces subjectivity and humanities-based approaches in patient-centered care. The byword is empathy, the capacity to take on the perspective of another, to tune in both cognitively and emotionally in order to understand and to help relieve their suffering. This is recognized as good medicine. Oh, that's my level of PowerPoint technology. So anyway, for many people in this context, literature is understood as a key to unleashing affect. As the cultural critic Josh Landy has written, quote, since some of us, especially blasé urbanites, says Wordsworth, have lost the capacity to register the full force of events, we need a mechanism for reconnecting us to affect. As Franz Kafka so beautifully puts it, quote, a book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. Everything I just said there is this guy Josh Landy. Okay, those are his words, quoting Kafka. Oh yeah, so this is reiterating the point. All over the place, Guardian, New York Times, HuffPo, this is what we all want and we all agree, end of story. Yeah. A book by Jodi Halpern names this cultural affective shift in its title, From Detached Concern to Empathy, Humanizing Medical Practice. Oops, is it on the next slide maybe? No, okay, go back. In the last 10 years, the use of the word empathy in medical journals has more than doubled. I actually kind of made that up, but I think we would find that the data bear us out on this. An article in the perspective section of the New England Journal of Medicine posed the following question, quote, how can we teach compassionate care as a learned skill in the same way that we teach the physical exam or the fundamentals of physiology? So here is one answer. How do we do this? How do we take medical students and teach them empathy? Okay. One answer is Empathetics, Inc., founded by Harvard researcher and TED talker Helen Rice. Text from the website. Do I have it up there on a slide, this text I'm about to read? No. Okay, go back. This is from the website, the Empathetics, Inc. website, which is constantly being updated, so I can't promise it's still there. Here's a quote. About us, the company and the people behind the passion. Empathetics provides innovative empathy and interpersonal skills training for medical professionals, leveraging new scientifically proven methods that enhance human relationships and make medical practice more effective and efficient. Are there any med students in the room? Oh, that's too bad. There's a reason for that, right? Here are some of the rationales for this training, the Empathetics training. Why? Question mark. With the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, reimbursement metrics have changed for hospitals to now incorporate patient satisfaction ratings. Communicating with empathy will lead to higher patient satisfaction, which in turn leads to what? Adherence to treatment regimen and better clinical health outcomes. For an average-sized community hospital, this could equate to nearly $9 million in reimbursements. Empathetics e-learning programs can reduce the likelihood of medical malpractice claims. The discourse of empathy here moves from a neuroscientific register into the language of consumer satisfaction. Empathetics, Inc. literally trades in this currency. It offers a number of products to boost empathy. For $300, when I last checked, you can order a, quote, 3-course suite of, quote, video-rich, interactive, online modules that include, this is their language, 15-question quizzes at the end and take most learners less than 1 hour to complete. These computer classes are, quote, self-paced, allowing users to fit their empathy training into their busy work schedules. So, what is a humanities teacher and scholar to do in the face of this strange embrace? To begin to think through the problem of empathy discourse, I wish to adopt what the scholar-philosopher Kenneth Burke, in his book Attitudes on History, has called the comic frame. So here's his description of the comic frame. This is Kenneth Burke, pragmatist philosopher. The comic frame is, quote, the methodic view of human antics as a comedy, ever on the verge of the most disastrous tragedy. Far from taking lightly or simply making fun of cultural foolishness, for Burke, For Burke, quote, comedy meditates on what we call, this is for you, the bureaucratization of the imaginative. This is still Burke. This formula is designed to name the vexing things that can happen when men try to translate some pure aim or vision, alleviation of suffering, say, into terms of its corresponding material embodiment, thus necessarily involving elements alien to the original or the spiritual motive. Alleviation of suffering, 15-question modules, self-paced, to learn compassion. So, the comic frame articulates the clash of perspectives in empathetics. The spiritual or the pure aim of Helen Rice, psychologist at Harvard, understood to be the compassionate, tactful, and competent, above all, competent care of patients. The material embodiment of this aspiration is the computer-driven teaching module that ironically translates the clinician-patient encounter into a disembodied and a solitary endeavor. If the spiritual motive is restoration of full personhood where it has been damaged, the material motive is maintaining the bottom line, translating human suffering into corporate profits. Burke playfully refers to the comic frame as, quote, a formula for providing, quote, perspective by incongruity. So that's a little technical, but perspective by incongruity. Again, here's Burke, a quotation. Bureaucratization is an unwieldy word, perhaps even an onomatopoeia, since it sounds as bungling as the situation it would characterize. With it, we couple the incongruously bulky and almost unpronounceable. So, Burke here is speaking in terms of institutions which thwart and ossify the spiritual motives of human beings. The realm of the imagination, by contrast, and this is Burke, okay? He says the realm of the imagination, quote, suggests pliancy, liquidity, the vernal. It welcomes, quote, disobedience to the reigning symbols. Disobedience to the reigning symbols. Similarly, the philosopher Henri Bergson also saw rigidity, the human tendency toward habit, routinization, machine-like behavior, lists, as fodder for the comic spirit. So, monotonous procedures, rote responses, scripted encounters, mind-numbing work. These make up the machinery that translates a pliant human being into an automaton. This is Henri Bergson writing in the year 1900, and he writes in all caps. That's not the way philosophers, am I right? They don't usually write in all caps. Okay. This one, Ray Barfield. Okay, I should have you read it. The attitudes and gestures and movements of the human body are laughable in exact proportion as that body reminds us of a mere machine. Okay, now we need him, yeah. The challenge, as scholar John Davidson has recently written, quote, is one of surmounting these obstacles and of finding new ways to perform old tasks. But how do we do this if we are all part of the machine? And the obvious thing to say is one thing that you can do is rail at doctors, you know. Ugh, those doctors, right? But that is, I'm just going off script here, but that is to reinstall the hierarchies and the notion that doctors have agency, right, and patients are passive recipients, right? Back to the hierarchy thing. If we take it and we go like that, take that and make it flat. We're all inscripted into this. We're all interpolated into this. The clinicians, the patients, the people who work in the hospital and clean up everything. Okay, there's a poignant comedic twist that marks the distinction between Charlie Chaplin and the film Modern Times and what we might call the postmodern comedy of the Empathetics program. And here it is. The factory manager in the Chaplin film was not seeking to foster human connection, nor was the end product of this factory meant to be the restoration of personhood. The machine in this factory is explicitly made to produce profits. So there's cultural critique happening, but there is not, if you will, a kind of fundamental, unbearable, stomach-wrenching twist at the core of this. In the US, the discourse of empathy in the workplace is pervasive, especially in law and jurisprudence. But it's also, okay, click, it's also gaining traction in the business community. And this, in turn, is leading to humor, in which the discourse of empathy is itself the butt of the joke. How many of you put yourself in at least one of your categories in the humanities side of things? Over half. How many of you put yourself in some categorical way on the health or medical side of things? And then there are others who didn't take a stance. So there are a few overlaps, but Okay, so I'm talking to, I don't know, half the room when I say here, many critics in the humanities are weary of empathy discourse. We have studied it. We have found it wanting. We have moved on. And despite the unexamined axiomatic equation of the humanities and the humane, traditionally, humanities scholars haven't been especially good at practicing empathy, especially when it comes to commenting on the methods, values, and assumptions of other fields of study. 5 years ago, health humanities scholar Ann Jurasik began an article which was entitled, quote, "Empathy and the Critic," with this sardonic line, okay? Here it goes. Empathy is hot in the academy as a topic of inquiry, if not a professional practice. So that, we can talk about that later, but just saying, content and practice not being in perfect alignment. Witness the fact that I have one delightful, lovely literature faculty member from UNC at this talk, right? I don't know, just saying. What is one to do with empathy from the health humanities perspective when the humanities are presumed to instill the core qualities of being human, yet are hijacked by neoliberal market-driven values of efficiency, optimization, self-management, conflict control, and consumer satisfaction ratings? So 2 days ago, we had a different slant on these questions, but weird, right? I mean, same page, Ray Barfield used a different list to say what was driving medicine, but there's a lot of overlap there. So, guess what? That was the introduction. In the remainder of my talk today, I track some of the unintended consequences of the institutional incorporation of empathy training. In particular, medical students' own experience of themselves as caught in a double bind, burdened by what I'm going to call ugly feelings that turn inward on themselves as much as, if not more than outward toward their patients and peers. My particular focus is on what is now known as the application phase of the medical curriculum, once known as the third year, the time that trainees head out of the lab, gross anatomy lab, out of the lecture hall, and go into the clinic full time for hands-on work with patients as they gain familiarity with different specialties. To point up the lived effects for those in the machine of medical education, of the increasing institutionalization and bureaucratization of empathy, I follow, this is my kind of critical theoretical framework, I follow the philosophers Kenneth Burke and Henri Bergson and enlist another zone of affect, not ugly feelings and not empathy, humor. So much of the rest of what I'm saying is actually meant to sort of amuse, right? So laughter is acceptable and even desirable. My sense is that offering students a mode of detachment, alerting them to the possibilities of what? Perspective by incongruity, may have 3 salutary effects. I'm now realizing this is the wrong version of my PowerPoint. I don't think they're up there. Crap. Okay, go back. Actually, no, we can stay there and you can look at that or listen to my 3 totally crucial points that I'm making. Okay, so 3 salutary effects, right? That's where we are. 1, to reinsert the body and body language, talk about the body, back into the discussion of empathy. It's not here and in a computer. Humor, as philosophers from Hobbes to Louis C.K. have noted, enlists the body, Chaplin, most obviously in laughter, but in many other really interesting ways that we can talk about. 2, this is a salutary effect, is to provide students a way to see themselves more clearly as embedded within a system, thereby helping to provide the structural competency that Jonathan Metzl of Vanderbilt and other health humanities scholars have argued is totally lacking in an overemphasis in medical training on culture and on personal feelings. Ideas in watered-down form that medicine borrows from psychology and anthropology. So no disrespect to psychology and anthropology, but let's just face it, the way it's mobilized, cultural competency in the medical context. I mean, my colleagues in anthropology, I swear to God, they want to vomit. They find it so troublesome in ways I can talk about in the Q&A. So you're noticing that there's a missing number, 3. The third salutary effect is that the comic spirit, I think, may prove homeopathic, which is to say a mildly subversive way to respect and restore personhood, which is, after all, what Burke would call the original purpose of empathy training, which medicine might call the original purpose of medicine, right? In what follows, humor, for me, serves as a lens, a mode of critique, and finally, and this is the speculative part, this is the part that bums me out that there are no med students here, but a possible point of leverage for bringing critique and practice together to accomplish clinical and educational goals. Okay, so I'm now actually really going to move quickly. There are 4 parts, but we'll go through them fairly quickly. What's this? Okay, let me share with you an anecdote drawn from a seminar that I'm currently teaching. At UNC, we have something called an intensive integration curriculum. It includes 3 seminars for what used to be called third-year students. One is called population health, totally important field of study. The other is called something like medical science, another really important thing. The third thing that I'm involved with is called rice. None of us can ever remember what that means. I want to say rice is R is reflection, I is inquiry, C is critique or maybe culture, and then E is, God help me, I don't know. Kim, do you know? We don't know. I am not alone. I teach it. Language. Okay, so I'm co-teaching with a physician colleague in obstetrics and gynecology. The shift from the classroom to the clinic in the traditional 3rd year is, for medical students, notoriously difficult. A guy named Jack Houlihan is one of many to raise this question about clinical training. Here's the question. How does professional socialization alter the student's beliefs and value system so that a commitment to the well-being of others either withers or turns into something barely recognizable? In March of this year, UNC School of Medicine rolled out a new interdisciplinary curriculum meant to supplement students as they embark on their clinical rotation. In the new curriculum, humanities topics are granted equal status with population health and clinical sciences. A once-a-month humanities seminar called RICE, oh, here it is meant to enhance skills in critical reflection, teamwork, I don't know, communication, and ethics. So we got 3 out of 4, 75%. Okay, intensive integration is now a required course. That's the key that I want to say. It's a required course for the cohort of 135 medical students who meet once a month in small groups with 2 professors, one a clinician, the other in some humanistic field. I can say right now, all the people from the humanities in this UNC curriculum stand before you right now. I admit. The rest are actually lovely people in social medicine and in, not the ministry, what do we call it? The chaplaincy. The chaplaincy in a med school. Okay. In a recent seminar, so now here's the anecdote. Okay, this is from, these guys are, delivering babies for the first time. They're participating in neurosurgery, as you'll hear, for the first time. Okay, here's an anecdote from one of my students. A medical student who is completing her neurosurgery clerkship offered the following anecdote. I'm going to call her Tanya. Here's the quote. "It had been a grueling day. UNC is a level 1 trauma center." She's got to say stuff like that because I don't know, right? I'm the humanities person. "UNC is a level 1 trauma center, and the neurosurgery team had been swamped with critical cases. In the afternoon, we found ourselves in the break room taking a rare breather. Suddenly, we get a call. A helicopter was coming in, transporting a patient from a rural clinic. Male, 92 years old, no brain function. As I struggled to take in these details, one of the residents looked at the other, or maybe it was attendings. Anyway, 2 higher up people looked at each other and said, ugh, that referring doc is definitely in need of..." Okay, here I pause for dramatic effect. In our McNider classroom over in UNC Medical Center, as I was listening to Tanya tell her story, my ears perked up when she began to quote the neurosurgery resident. The periodic sentence structure left the punch for the end, like a fill-in-the-blank or a Mad Libs. Hi, Pat. And maybe like you, with my health humanities mind whirring, a number of possible fill-in-the-blanks came up. Man, that guy who sent the brain-dead 92-year-old to us was really in need of, perhaps, a quick read of Atul Gawande's Being Mortal on what extraordinary measures not to inflict on 92-year-olds. Being Mortal was UNC's summer reading this year. Perhaps that doc needs a workshop on ethical, patient-centered decision-making, or even a rapid tutorial, frankly, in health economics. A reminder that stunning expenditures at the end of life often just immiserate patients, doctors, staff, everybody, right? Here's how the neurosurgeon actually finished the sentence. I hope it shows up. "He needs an empathectomy." This swerve, I will admit, caught me by surprise. Tanya found her preceptor's comments outrageous. I guess I should pause for 1 second. You guys are here. You're going to leave when you want to leave, right? I'm going to take a little time. What do you think those guys, and they were all guys, Tanya was the only woman in the room, but those more experienced guys meant when they said, ugh, that guy needs an empathectomy, that referring doc? What were they trying to get at? He needs a heart. Yeah. But what's your name? Neonda. Neonda, what could be more empathic? I'm a rural doc. I am not a trauma 1, whatever, center. This poor guy, this poor family, they need treatment that will help him, and I'm sent, right? That's a heart. You see the teacher provokingness happening here.
Maybe they just wanted that referring doc to get real.
Get real about what?
That he was going to die.
Gonna die. But why wouldn't they say that doc's got to get real, man? This patient's gonna die. Why are they? What? Why did they say?
My own opinion, having taught neurosurgeons how to communicate with patients, I think it's because the doctor who made that comment doesn't know who he is. And so for him, it's not an act of empathy to put a 92-year-old man on a helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. If you were really practicing empathy, you do just the opposite. So for a neurosurgeon to say this needs an empathectomy has to do with their scorn for empathy.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I would explain it.
And you see the kind of contradiction at the heart of that. And this is Mark Twain level humor. Mark Twain level. When I say the person making the joke's on you. Over and over again in Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, right? Over and over. More to say, but I love your interpretation. Got to keep going. Okay. Back to Tanya. She struggled to finish the sentence just telling this story. Such was her repugnance and outrage. Speaking to our race seminar group, Tanya added, after telling this, I mean, it was really like watching her get the words out. Everyone in the break room laughed. What's that all about? What's funny about amputating the very thing that all of our training maintains is absolutely essential to being a doctor? Why indeed did they laugh? Well, not especially funny, and right? Not especially funny. And we're also suspending the question. There's always a question with the joke of who's the butt, right? We'll suspend that, but we can recognize it as a joke. Such as it was, it turned on the incongruity of imagining that the exact same thing, empathy, could be obstructive and essential to good doctoring. I think maybe, oh yeah. In their book, it's not this book, but in another book, it's called Inside Jokes, Using Humor to Reverse Engineer the Mind, Matthew Hurley, grad student, Daniel Dennett, his mentor, frame humor in cognitive terms. Humor allows human beings to, quote, debug mental representations. That is, find tacit incongruities and contradictions within representations and to bring them to light. Moreover, humor isn't just about jokes. In the space of human cognitive traits, in the neighborhood of humor, we also find such categories as non-humorous riddles, wordplay, and problem solving. There is a terrific medical anthropologist named Anne Tolpin Burson who writes about what she calls biomedical speech play. And I want to say that we can see empathectomy as something to add to a whole bunch. You can actually go online and look up biomedical speech play phrases and you'll get things like, you know them, fascinoma, right? Patient comes in, we don't know what it is, it's a fascinoma. Another one, is this a thing? Gorillacillin?
Yeah.
Gorillacillin. Yeah, they're very creative, okay? So gorillacillin, as I understand it, is, you know, you give someone just, I don't know what's going on here, it might be MRSA, it might be C. diff, give them this, right? Gorillacillin. See what happens. Is that right, kind of? Okay. So Anne Tolpin Burson, a real anthropologist, says that such speech juxtaposes, these are her words, the social and emotional aspects of hospital life with the purely scientific and intellectual. So, to my literary ears, empathectomy announced itself as what American humorist Mark Twain would call, anyone know? Anyone know Kim Weed?
A snapper.
A snapper. She's got the paper right in front of her. A snapper, which is the point or the nub of a humorous story. For Twain, the snapper is the purview of the trickster figure, someone talented at, back to Burke, unsettling the system, upsetting its rhythms, exposing conflicts and contradictions. So, by bringing two apparently unreconcilable points of view into sudden alignment, we are jolted into seeing competing assumptions laid bare side by side. This swift recognition of logical impossibility may be registered in embodied form through laughter. Our brains work quicker. Like, could you imagine, how long is it? Do you see how much I'm killing what was meant to be a joke, right? You kind of stretch it out in time and this and that, right? But this happens in an instant. And of course, we could talk a lot about the role of time in the medical context and how things have to be done in instants. So, this swift recognition can be registered in laughter, yet the exact same set of circumstances, taken literally, as Mark Twain well knew, can seem foolish, simple-minded, or offensive to good morals and good taste. The character of Huck Finn is Twain's best-known literal responder. Huck was naive and took contradictory social mores and values at face value. For instance, the cardinal belief, American belief in liberty, existing side by side the American institution of slavery, right? That's what Twain did, is he took those and he put them side by side and he embodied them in the character of Jim, right? And he did it through the relationship of friendship, which is not hierarchy, it's sideways. I could say more. A pragmatist, a literal responder, a trickster figure, Huck is at the moral center of the novel precisely because he doesn't judge and leaves the cognitive work for the reader. My student Tanya, back to her, in wondering how a physician could recommend excising another clinician's empathy, she was like Huck. She took the situation literally. Like Huck, Tanya found nothing funny here. Her affective response took the form of what my students call judginess.
Of what?
Judginess, a new affect. I really didn't know it. And I maintain it is. It should be in, Hobbes's sort of taxonomy. They report feeling judgy on a daily, almost hourly basis in their clinical clerkships. Judginess toward others. You're pregnant and you're smoking, right, or whatever, fill in the blank. Judginess toward others, however, has a discomfiting way of then redounding back onto the judger. I might call it a boomerang effect. Feeling judgy in the context of the clinic has a tendency to initiate what I would call an affective spiral. The person feels a hot wave of judginess toward a peer, a preceptor, a patient. He then feels judgy toward herself. I'm being very cis here. He then feels judgy toward herself for feeling judgy. My personal favorite zone of humor is typo and autocorrect. Anyway. But then the spiral continues, then feels annoyance at whoever forced them to feel judgy, and then judgy toward themselves. And you get it. It cycles on. I say I have a slide. No, go back. Ugh. Judginess is a great candidate for what affect theorist Cyan Nye has called ugly feelings. In her book of the same name, Nye focuses on what she calls states of weakness, on minor or non-cathartic feelings that index, that mark, that label situations of suspended agency. We don't know who the butt of the joke was. We don't know whose agency is being suspended. In trivial aesthetic categories, grounded in ambivalent or even explicitly contradictory feelings. Didn't pace that quite right, but you get the idea. When you feel an ugly feeling, which just won't quite resolve, it spirals, keeps going, ends up where? We know where it ends up. Burnout. The dumping ground known as burnout. So, Cyan Nye, this affect theorist, who has nothing to say about medicine, gets it. So one exemplary modern affect that Nye describes is, she calls it stuplimity. Stuplimity. It's a neologism that describes an unnerving, paralyzing combination of shock and boredom. Quote, the sudden excitation of shock and the desensitization we associate with boredom, though diametrically opposed and seemingly mutually exclusive, are both responses that confront us with the limitations of our capacity for responding in general. Med students, especially when they're little, they aspire to be first responders, right? They aspire to be, so beautifully said, the person who runs into the burning building and not out of it. But they're in situations where they don't know how to respond. The affects are too ugly, they're too tangled, right? Nye, in making all this up or describing it, did not mean to invoke a term that now dominates discussion of mental health among physicians, but we can hear in her description of stuplimity a pretty good précis of characteristic symptoms of burnout. And you know that there are three: exhaustion, depersonalization, and self-censure. Judgy. For Nye, ugly feelings are informative entry points for critique. That's the good news. Signaling, as they do, constrained human responses. Okay, this is a heavy quote. Ugly feelings signal or index our gut responses to what Theodore Adorno calls the, quote, fully administered world of late modernity. We could put Charlie Chaplin back in there. The thing about Charlie Chaplin, the notion is that crunch between the gears happens in the factory, right? Adorno is talking about when the crunch happens, not just in the factory, but in the home and in the human psyche. Two lovely friends from Washington, D.C. just got off I-85 and arrived. I'm delighted. You haven't missed anything, because look at how many pages I have to go. Anyway, For Nye, ugly feelings are informative entry points for critique. So Adorno, when he writes about this, and he writes about it in a book called The Dialectic of Enlightenment, he says, this administered world, this machine world of late modernity, is structured by the promise of modern science, medicine, and technology, right? The promise to do what? To free people from ignorance, disease, and brutal mind-numbing work. And yet, the persistence and indeed amplification, what happens, right, in the context I'm describing, rather than that delightful, yeah, let's use machines, and we no longer have to use our feet to make the sewing machine go, and that liberates housewives everywhere, right? That's the notion. Instead, what we see in the context I'm describing of the clinic and of medical education is the persistence and indeed the amplification of ignorance, disease, and brutal mind-numbing work. So Adorno is speaking to what? He's speaking to a contradiction. Certainly, I want to say at the heart of the clinic. He would say at the core of modern existence. Let's keep it small. The empathectomy anecdote and Tanya's irritated, distressed, and judgy response points to a contradiction in the heart of modern medical education between the promise of empathy to relieve suffering and depersonalization of patients, and yet the persistence and indeed amplification of suffering and depersonalization among clinicians. For this concept that I'm circling us around, we can turn to Dr. Seuss, right? Think of the Cat in the Hat. He goes in, he takes a bath, and he leaves a ring on the tub, right? Do you remember that? Anyway, the cat goes into the house, leaves a ring on the tub, no problem, he can clean it up. But as he cleans it up, the ring shows up over there, and then you clean that up, and the ring is over there, right? So you see, I'm trying to point to this problem of empathy, right? Like the solution disperses, deflects the problem, but doesn't eradicate it. So I've tidied up the whole Tanya discussion and empathectomy. And here's my thought. Ugly feelings, when properly acknowledged, deflected, and diffused in certain kinds of ways through things like humanistic discussion, right, may point to zones of engagement and remediation. But we have to follow the ugly feeling. We can't just put the perfume of empathy on top of the stench of judginess. Okay, part 2. So, to back up a moment, right now in the US, there's an assumption that empathy is both a skill to be acquired and an inborn capacity. Here is a video infomercial created by, you ready? Okay, almost ready. Remember, it's got to be partway through, not the beginning. Here's a video infomercial created by the Drexel University School of Medicine that expresses this doubleness, right? Skill and inborn capacity. Okay, we need to start on or about 39.
More empathic, it seems odd. Can you help someone become more empathic? But the answer, we can help them say the right thing. They learn to say the right thing, they learn to pause, they learn to listen better, and then they find that it works, and then they keep doing it.
Okay. So, recall that Empathetics, Inc. says that it bases its program on neuroscience. One can hear the implicit invocation of physiology as well, right?
The other video started to play.
Empathy is an essential ingredient to high-quality healthcare. You can't...
Oh, that's not even mine, actually. Oh, it's the one, right, it could keep going. Okay, so neuroscience, but in the Drexel guy, you hear physiology, not neuroscience. Like a gland, right, the brain and nervous system secretes a reservoir of empathy. But the brain is also a muscle, it turns out. Repetition, workable lines, proper training can strengthen its capacity, the brain's capacity for empathy, right? And they just keep doing it. That's the repetition. So here, medical education tends to treat empathy either, again, as a skill to be cultivated or as a bodily fluid to be replenished once it is drained off by, I think he was the one who said this term, difficult situations. Difficult situations tend to cause problems. Okay, so here's the question. What, in the context of medical education, we might ask, counts as a difficult situation? The medical students I teach have made me aware of one particular difficult situation that without fail confronts every single trainee in the United States. Now let's go to the beginning of the Drexels. What's so difficult, you guys? Why is this, why is it so hard to access your empathy? What's the problem here? And we got to go back to the other guy, yeah.
We test our students. Our students in this lab go through a multi-station OSCE, Objective Structured Clinical Examination, like you see going on back here.
Oh, yeah.
And the students interact with 10 or 11 standardized patients, and we generate reports, we give them feedback, we videotape them, and students get credit for doing excellent jobs, but there's some students that we find have, some deficiencies, and we can help them during their fourth year remediate those deficiencies. We can help them become more empathic. It seems odd. Can you help someone become more empathic?
Okay, we know where this goes. Right.
Every student that comes into our school has a reservoir of empathy.
Okay. First of all, how many of you know what a standardized patient is? Okay, half the room. My understanding, clinicians, is that there are 6 or 8 locations in the country where for the OSCEs, for the Step 2 clinical exams.
The national exam.
The national exams. Okay, for the national exams, where students, on their own dime, med students,
Right.
pretty sure. Anyway, they have to go and they have to have their clinical skills tested. And that, of course, is how good are you at taking blood. I don't know, a patient presents a whole bunch of symptoms and you're trying to figure out like your house MD kind of thing, right? What is it? It turns out the patient's alcoholic, but you have to ask the right question to get at that. It's liver and not, a cold or something. Okay, who are the patients who they practice on, right?
Actors?
Actors, yes, actors. Kim Weed, some of these actors, who are they? What kind of people in this world?
Some of them are older adults.
Some-
Many of them are older adults.
A lot of them are older adults who are hired from the community. So they act, but they may not be actors, right? So yeah, all sorts of people are standardized patients, including, I had the right answer in mind, Kim, which is grad students. There are a lot of grad students who do this.
A lot of places actually use actors.
And a lot of places actually use actors. Side note, if you look that stuff up, you are going to find hilarious stuff on the internet because it turns out med students, I came across this one video where med students in a kind of skit, because that's a thing that they do at different points, I guess. It's like Carnival or something. So they get up and let loose, and they did this one that I came across. These med students pretended that they were standardized patients. And the hilarity of that to me is incredible. And what they did is they said, yeah, I've always wanted to be a standardized patient. And they kind of played it out, which I thought was astonishing and lovely. It was part of a kind of humor skit. What do we call those things?
Parody.
It was a parody. And they were actually exhibiting a lot of empathy for the actors who it's a job for them. So I love that because it was doing the empathy without having it, inserted into you like you're receiving blood or something. Okay. So our intensive integration students are acutely aware that they are staring down the barrel of the United States Medical Licensing Examination Step 2 clinical skills. They are indeed a difficult situation. We can see a catch-22 emerging, institutionalized through the Step 2 clinical exams. on-demand empathy practice becomes precisely the difficult situation that the Drexel video seeks to remediate. There are dozens of blogs and chat rooms devoted to the exams that involve standardized patients. Trainees swipe, let's now do this. Oh, this doesn't exactly fit in here, but the notion is, you know, how are you going to deal with a difficult situation or a difficult conversation? You know, in this case, breaking bad news. I've learned in my experience with UNC Hospital that for anything you come across practically, including breaking bad news, there is going to be a one-page, 8.5 by 11 sheet that addresses it. It will be organized with a lot of white space for quick, easy reference, and it will almost always involve some sort of, what do we call that, spikes? There's a word for it. Acronym, yeah. Okay, let's go again though. Okay, this is, so you just check out the internet for 1 second and you'll get a million hits. On blogs, if that's the right word, or chat rooms, if that's the right word, trainees swap supportive phrases and commiserate about the stress, fatigue, and panic that preparation and execution of the clinical exams entail. Students are aware of themselves as performers, with the irony that they're performing personhood. In the words of one student, this is from an article I found, it's also theatrical. Be slick at this, be slick at that. We need acting lessons. Okay, but look at this. I mean, do any of you have standby empathetic / supportive / understanding / emotional listening phrases for your Foskey-Oskey performances, right? These are the ones I usually use. I can certainly understand why you would feel that way, whatever the way is, you know. Has illness / problem caused any additional problems in your life? I am sorry to hear that. Please tell me more. I'm sorry for your loss. Were you close? How did that make you feel? I would like, I mean, there is, to me, this is feeling rich, but not, do you see what I mean? Not precisely in the way it's kind of intended. I would like to add a bit of variety to my phrasing, but I'm horrible at coming up with these types of touchy-feely phrases, so please help, right? Okay. Listen to this, because I think this really captures something that I'm trying to say. So here's an excerpt. I got this off the web, so it's not my trainee. Listen to this story. Shared with anonymous millions of others. I failed step 2 clinical exams, but I passed on the second attempt. I survived, and you can too. Okay, first of all, you know, talk about sort of expression of fellow feeling and practical compassion. Because this person went on to tell the story. And this is what this person wrote. I failed step 2 CS. Oh, I just read that. I was an average student, average board scores. Okay, this is a medical student. My clinical skills, or whatever you want to call them, however, were never in question. So translate for those of you, basically, I'm kind of a B student when it comes to organic chemistry or physiology, but man, I've got a good heart. I'm really good at clinical skills. I know how to talk to people. That's my strength. That's my strong point. I always get great evals and crushed my simulated patient tests, OSCE and others, and this own version of CS my school gave. I heard the, you can fail, don't be too cocky, and told myself, yeah, but that's for the weird motherfuckers in my class who have no social skills or get really nervous. This is going to be a breeze. And then I failed. I'll spare the drama, but it was devastating, and I thought I derailed my future. Right? I thought I derailed my future. I was plunged into a space of uncertainty. I didn't know. My personhood was damaged. I didn't know where it was going to go. Okay. As Burke's comic frame might lead us to anticipate, recall the idea of pure spiritual motives getting translated into the worldly, carnal, venial realm of bureaucratization. There are solutions to the student's despair and panic at the demands for empathy on the spot. okay? There's a solution here. Now we need our other video. Oh shoot, go to 119, I think it's kind of there. Here's one online training course that explains how to pass the exam.
Bottom line is that all students taking the CS exam absolutely must follow a structure that gives them enough time to properly complete each phase of the encounter. That's why the Success Academy developed its 1842 method for attacking each patient encounter.
Listen to the language.
No matter how simple or how difficult they may be, it has provided our students with the opportunity to extract the relevant information in order to obtain the maximum amount of points in the least amount of time, so that they can then focus on preparing their patient note with that full 10 minutes at their disposal. The Success Academy's
That's enough, right?
is broken.
You get it. Okay, so back, I hope the next slide is what I want it to be. Yeah, it is. Good. It's right there. 24. So on the one hand, we have that, but then we have this blog post by and for med students, right? If you panic, just remember you have an algorithm developed. I made this test as fail-safe as I could, tried to eliminate any human element on my second attempt. I passed by a healthy margin the second time around. Okay, I mean, unintended humor, right? I mean, you're weeping. It's both, right? But then listen to the next line, the yellow line, right? So we get the this patient. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying, is that the med students are patients, you know. They're living in a life of uncertainty. They don't know what the outcome's going to be. There's real suffering and pathos in this. And they're out of the morass of just BS, gross algorithm talk. We get that. And to me, that's real. So, I think I said all this. Our intensive integration students understand everything that I've just described. Okay, I'll just stop. I'll say this one last thing. They get it. They love these found moments of humor, and they're myriad. And I also am experimenting with different kinds of texts, literature, that can help to elicit this. Honest to God, I think Flannery O'Connor is like a go-to kind of person for this. I don't know what you guys think, but I think House of God actually is kind of spot on and really interesting also in the way that it captures a 1970s moment and not a 2016 moment. But these works of, you know, comedy, let's click, I'm just going to click through. We'll click through, Deborah, and then we'll be done. Yeah, it's good. So, mainly people think this in medical humanities or health humanities. We are under the brilliant, very large shadow, mixed metaphor to die for. We're under the brilliant shadow of Rita Sharon and her narrative medicine, right? Go to literature, read Middlemarch, for sure. I tell my students that all the time. That way you slow down, you know, all of this stuff. But of course, the whole point, there are no med students here. They don't have time for anything. They can't read Middlemarch. They can't even read what's assigned to them. They have to go to compiled notes that other people have done for them, right? So what are top medical schools starting to realize? Oh, let's get them already, almost like an iPod. They're already stocked with Middlemarch. Do you know what I mean? Oh, Emily Dickinson. I like a look of agony because I know it's true. It's all already in there. So there's a certain brilliance to the medical system in turning to our delightful, you guys undergrads? Our wonderful humanities undergrads, right? Okay, keep going. But the text I really, really want to teach, and I haven't yet, but I think it will kind of do a lot of the work that I'm starting to say, which is if the affects are so twisted together, how do we kind of lay them flat and look at the notion, for instance, that I've been tracing, that empathy causes suffering? Correct. Training and testing in empathy causes suffering, that the suffering gets expressed in ugly feelings of irritability and impatience and so on, right? how do we both lay that bare, and then by laying it bare, have that experience, which is beautiful, of like, oh, this is real. This isn't fake. And part of the not fakeness is that you actually laugh at it, right? So how do we do it? And I think this amazing, it's kind of a television show, is one way to do it. It's called A Young Doctor's Notebook. Daniel Radcliffe is the young doctor, essentially a third-year medical student, tossed into the clinic. Clinic just happens to be, you know, rural Siberia or something. But he's in constant conversation with his older self, same character, hilarious, you know, 2-foot-tall Daniel Radcliffe and John Hamm, right? They're the same character, and they talk across the operating table together, because basically Daniel Radcliffe is the idealist young med student. John Hamm is the opium-addicted, burnt-out future self. And they battle it out literally over a child whose leg was so mauled. We're talking like serfs, rural Russian farmers. Her leg was so mauled in some farm apparatus that Daniel Radcliffe had to saw it off with what a dull saw, right? So they argue, and the blood is going everywhere. And at a certain point in that moment, you cannot believe it. The leg starts, you know, they start slipping on the blood, and the leg gets kind of knocked around, the girl's leg, and gruesome stuff, right? But what I'm trying to say, and it's also hilarious, and it's absurdist, because it puts two things, idealism and the reality, right next to each other in the same frame of a TV show. Go watch it. It's not for everybody. Okay, what's the next? Okay, we're going to now end here with kind of this, I think, is my takeaway. And that John McGowan, I really, really like citing my friends because I think they're incredibly smart and because I kind of know where they're coming from. So John McGowan in the English department at UNC-Chapel Hill, he writes, comedy, unlike tragedy, is not metaphysical, it's social. And it deals not with an isolated individual, but with selves in relation to each other. Society is rejuvenated quite literally. It is saved from becoming dry, sterile, and joyless, a mere following of established rules and roles. A creative chaos loosens up the prevailing norms and allows them to be reformulated in ways that give greater satisfaction. Comedy is about change. I should have highlighted that. Comedy is about change, about the movement to a social order that better accommodates our desires. I kind of also really wanted my last slide to be Coach Taylor, with the guys putting their hand up on whatever that thing is outside the locker room, saying, what? Clear eyes, pure hearts can't lose. Full. Oh, I'm so glad it's not pure. That's not what I wanted, right? So clear eyes, pure hearts. Oh God, what she said, okay? That's what I'm talking about. And the question is how to get there. How to get back to the beginning. Like that song, right? That Coldplay song. How do you get back to the beginning? It's called The Scientist. That's what I'm trying to talk about. Like, how do we find what is precisely already there if it weren't occluded by incredible layers of crap, for sure, and then an institutional structure, right? That makes, well, put it this way. I'm going to end by quoting Ray Barfield over here. You said something like, what do I want to say here?
I was just making it up as I'm going to say.
I know, which is so not me. And look what happens when I try to make it up as I go. No, I want to try to capture this. There's something, I mean, this is part of what I took from Ray's talk 2 days ago. Part of it was something like this. Like we have a patient who has this kind of rich social situation and relationships and dogs and, you know, things in the fridge. That we call life. And they go to the hospital, and all the things that make the dogs and the mayonnaise and, you know, the rug and the garage and the job and the power suit, all that makes up the life gets kind of drained away in a hospital setting. And so what Ray was talking about was some kind of doctoring through storytelling that acted as a prosthesis, if you know what I mean, to help that person whose selfhood has been just made strange to themselves, how to get them back into a place where they kind of recognize themselves again. So I think I hope you're following this last analogy, and because what I'm trying to say is the medical students and the clinicians also are just profoundly, except these two guys, but profoundly estranged from the 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 6-year-old playing doctor thing that made them want to look after people for a living, right? So this, my way too long talk has traced this sort of circuit by which I'm hoping we could find a way to get people back, in a sense, to these things that existed before they're denatured, and somehow work on the denaturing machinery itself. I am an optimist. I don't know that Theodore Adorno, in the context of late modernity, believes that there's remediation possible, but I'm a pragmatist. So I'm going to pause, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about basically the role of dark humor in medical education. Done. Or just good joke.
You have reached the incontinence helpline. Can you hold?
Oh my God. Okay, there's real laughter and then there's groan. It's good though. What about, why do they all have to be urine jokes? Bob Dole. Do you remember that MTV interview? Okay, Bob Dole, this is a frivolous interview. Which is it, boxers or jockeys? Bob Dole's reply, depends. Okay, but enough of that.
It's interesting to, so we've started doing something called medical improv, and we've run now 4 weekend seminars, and they're always packed. We have to turn medical students and nursing students and PA students away.
Annika, will you write down what he's saying? I mean, because you're going to give the contact, or so we can sign up and get turned away too.
You're welcome to be turned away. We're turning away the best and brightest. And, but the thing about it that you know, I mean, I really enjoyed your talk a lot, and it made me think about we started medical improv more than anything as just out of a kind of an intuition that this was a good place to go. I did this medical improv. I did this improv intensive, and it was just one exercise that changed. It was called a yes and exercise.
Yeah.
Where instead of doing what doctors frequently do, which is to walk into the middle of another person's astonishing drama and listen to them give an account of their drama, and then respond with yes, comma, but, and then to do a biological information dump to essentially replace the reality they just told in the story with a reality that fits into the electronic medical record. What improv does is, it's the very first exercise that they teach is something called yes and. And so we just did that. We sat there back and forth, and we said, I mean, it doesn't have to be funny. It's the structure of yes and, because we usually think of comedy with improv. But you know, you say, well, there's white bread in the grocery store. Yes, and there's brown bread next to the white bread. Yes, and if you want to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, you need to go to the next aisle to get peanut butter. Yes, and. I mean, there's nothing funny about that at all. It is, but it's the structure of you say something real about the world, and then I affirm it, and then build on it with an and. And so I don't negate the reality of the world that you just said, that you just brought into the room. And so that little structure, yes and, that it clicked, like in the first 10 minutes of taking this 2 weeks of intensive improv, that if we just change one thing, I mean, Neil is internationally known for teaching communication and goes profoundly deep. But I think change that one thing. And so I thought, why don't we start teaching that to medical students? We'll just teach that. It'll take 10 minutes. We'll teach them to say yes and. But we've started into doing longer seminars, and we're moving towards a several-day intensive that we hope to do, because it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And it turns out people are doing it at Hopkins, they're doing it out in Seattle, they're doing it up in Chicago. We've gotten connected with some Second City faculty who are going to help us grow this thing. And there's something of what, but this is I'm sorry, this is taking way too long. So the piece that one piece of your talk that really grabbed me as I was thinking about medical improv is that so much of improv is actually letting go of the cognitive structures, and you do improv with your body. You feel, it is more letting go than it is like standing on the sidelines waiting for your turn and trying to think of something really clever that you're going to say next, because you're going to bring down the house and everyone's going to laugh, and then you're going to be at the center. It's not that at all. It's letting go of these cognitive structures and trying to help the other person to succeed and not negating the world that they bring in. And something bigger than either one of you is happening when you're doing improv well. And that seems to me it's something I don't understand yet because I'm really brand new at it. And Dan Sipp, who is an improvisational master, is the one who is bringing all the expertise to it. But I am interested in trying to get a sense of why this is working. And part of it is we take these medical students, and instead of doing this absurd exercise that where, like, as they're supposed to be showing empathy, they're being tested, they're being filmed, they're being recorded, they're being graded, they're being, that we just say no grades, no test, no nothing, and the only thing that we're going to do is we're going to play, and we begin to play, and as they let go of their medicalness, we can go into things that at the end of it, I can literally tell them what earlier that day, how I used that very kind of thing in a successful family meeting in the intensive care unit. And so much of it is from the neck down, and so much of the cognitive part that happens is hurling yourself forward, risking, like not knowing what's coming next, not simply listening in order to usurp the conversation, or listening so it's a beautiful kind of thing. But that physicalness that you're talking about, that's so important for the comedic aspects, that's at the heart of improv. And I wonder if that kind of thing wouldn't be a great place to explore some of your ideas in a very pragmatic way, in the medical training setting.
I have lots to say, but I've said a lot, so go.
Yeah, it's from the head down, but I think this idea of empathy it's also different from the heart. So the heart is not at the heart of things. So what I hear James saying is it's about this stomach-wrenching twist. It's about the gut. It's about the crunch. It's about something that's visceral and embodied in a different way that takes it out of the script of the heart also, which has its own moral restrictions. So I'm wondering about that incongruity and how humor opens up a different level of the body that hasn't been transacted into the whole experience. And that's why it opens up a latitude that can reflect differently upon it, you know?
Neil, what's pros?
Yeah, I loved your talk. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. So thank you for sharing all of the process.
Thank you.
I agree with Ray about improv. I think that a successful medical encounter between a doctor and a patient has the creativity of improv. Because you don't know you never know what's going to happen next. And you have to respond in the moment, and there's no way to slow down. So it's all about, you know, to be the cliche that being present and paying attention. And then having skills at your disposal, including humor. Not black humor, but this time for humor is the one thing that can connect with the patient. So all of that is true. And, yes, and I have a concern. And here's my concern.
Well learned, yeah.
I've learned a lot from Ray over the years. This is a fun little piece.
Yeah.
I'm charged with the responsibility of trying to help medical students not be as horrible to their patients as the resident was to my father when he found that he had cancer. Okay, that's like a very visceral kind of reality I deal with. And I think the only way, all of the things that you kind of were showing on the screen and with the sense of, what's the word, sort of, yeah, thank you, that's probably as good as anybody put it, are things that have become very close to my heart because they really change the way doctors behave in a positive way. If you look at that spikes thing you put up there,
Yeah.
which is
Would
in some
you
way extremely
get
formulaic.
spikes?
So I've made videos for training neurosurgeons and other kinds of surgeons. And we have one where the surgeon does it the way they normally do it, and one where they use that, more or less that protocol, close to exactly. And we don't have time to go through it, but if I showed you the two videos and said to you, which one do you want for your father? You would be 100% of this. And having said that, these are things that are not intuitive. These particular 6 things in this case are not things that we know to say intuitively.
Yeah.
They're really things that have to be learned and as techniques. Now, I don't know if it's relying on a reservoir of empathy or I suspect this, what Dennis Novak said is true. There's like, people have a certain amount of empathy, and many of us don't know how to express it. It's not intuitive. And I'll give you one example if I may, and then I'll stop talking. I got a wonderful email from a former student of mine that he sent me a letter he got from a patient in the emergency department in Seattle. And he said, the letter went something like this. He said, he wrote to the head of the hospital and complimenting this resident. And he said, I want to tell you about this resident because he did something that was so very special. He asked me at the end of the encounter, he said to me, what questions do you have? And he didn't say, do you have any questions? He said, what questions do you have? And he said, that very phrase gave me the space to actually explore my deepest concerns. Now, I hammer away at my students to say, what questions do you have? In a way that would be similar to this kind of roadmap. And I think charged with the task of trying to turn a large number of students into empathetic doctors, I don't know any other way to do it. I love for them to read novels as well, and I teach them. I teach from literature. I'm teaching a course right now in that. But in my heart, I think this actually, when you look at it in its horrible version, which is Empathetics Inc., it's horrible. When you see it in the day-to-day practice of training doctors, it's a hell of a lot better than we had 10, 20, 30 years ago. And it impacts on people in a very, very positive way. And it impacts on patients, and it's proven to do so.
Yeah, a quick intervention, and then I'd love to hear other questions. Do you hear what's happening here? Which is we're talking about 2 different modes of teaching, right? So there's a way in which we are agreeing so deeply that the purpose is alleviating suffering, learning from prior horrors and idiocies sometimes, and just fatigues, and preventing in the future, right? That's to change, right? That's what we're talking about. We're talking about change. But how do you change things within an ossified, increasingly ossified structure that is the hospital, medical education, the pharmaceutical industrial complex, right? We're working within overlapping, contradictory structures, right? So how do we get back to just this basic core question of the alleviation of suffering? So Ray is saying, actually, I'm finding this works. This improv stuff is working because, and this is, I really want to say this, it's very true. I've got friends in the room, and we share a friend, you know, in end-of-life situation. I kind of want to say, with what you said about improv, as a mode of accomplishing this good work, alleviation of suffering, how can we begin to ask patients at the most heartbreaking time of their life to let go, right? If the people involved in doing that don't themselves take that risk. And it's not even that big a risk. Improv is actually, it has a play frame. You go to it, and you stay there for 2 hours, and then you leave. You know what I mean? That's a homeopathic dose of the letting go that in so many ways, right, we ask of patients. Let go of your clothes. You know, let go of your dignity. Let go of knowing how this is going to work. Let go of your autonomy, and let me, I'm kind of quoting Ray right now, let me put a bag of bright orange fluid with a biohazard label on it into the main line into your chest. Let go of your desire not to let me do that. So, to me, this is what we really need, is something that gets us essentially there, into the contingency of life, because it's the experience of patients dealing with big and small things. Because that's a lot to ask. You know, I once went to a meditation retreat, and it was so funny. The person was explaining the kind of Buddhism or whatever that it was, and said, you know, the teacher originally just said, okay, everyone, you know, sit down, achieve enlightenment. You know, that wasn't a very good, you know, set of procedures. Give me, you know, where's the prompt? Where's the one-page spikes, right? And what meditators, that Ruth Ann knows, what meditators do, what this guy essentially did is, oh crap, for you to achieve meditation, I kind of have to give you something else to do to get there. Okay, why don't you just concentrate on your breath, right? So if we're not going to get this, you know, improv for everybody and so on, oh my God, yes to what you described. Capital yes with many exclamation points. And I'll tell you why. These are two modes of representation. I'm an English teacher, not a doc, right? I am a doc. I've used that too. I'm not a medical doctor.
Rare.
Yeah, rare. Thank you. See, I got to tell you, I have to do a meta comment. What begins to happen when anything about humor enters the conversation, you can already hear it. We did a little inside joke right there, which amused and delighted me, and I felt more comfortable in this room, right? So we're talking at some level, I am talking about teaching, and I'm talking about change and alleviation of suffering, but I'm also talking about creation of community, right? In a tiny way, we have a tiny little community. Here's what I want to say, Neil, though, about your mode. Your mode is mimetic, right? It's the actor mode. And let me just say, as someone who's studied this stuff, Diderot, right, big theorist, Dennis Diderot, big theorist of acting, and the thing about acting is there are two models, right? The kind where you know that this gesture produces I don't know what, drama, right? And then you have Marlon Brando and Stanislavski, right? And you've got, you know, and you walk around being Stanley Kowalski for 7 weeks or something when you make the movie. That's what we're hearing here. And this is good, right? Stanley Kowalski, Dennis Diderot, something like that. You know, if you can't improv, and we know it takes a master or mistress to do that. And to get there, the only way to get there is to do it over and over and over again. You don't become a master. There's a great joke, this is Zora Neale Hurston. The one thing God can't do is make a 7-year-old mule in a day. There's wisdom there. You got to do it. What are you going to do until you become Ray Barfield, right? You are going to, you don't know where I'm going with this. You are going to have a spikes list. You are going to have really really good suggestions. Guys, I was in the emergency room on Saturday night in Mass General, and this nurse came in and started doing this stuff. That's why I was looking. I wasn't checking my, texts. But I wish I started taking notes somewhere in my phone, and I just can't quite see, because I wrote down the stuff that this nurse said. Because it was beautiful. It was beautiful, and it was simple. It's not that. Anyway, I'll keep trying to find it. But it was like exactly what Neil said, right? What questions do you have? Not do you have questions. And let's just say the really obvious thing. Do you have questions is a binary. Yes or no. It's not eliciting. And we know that, right? And we know. Here's the thing, too. Patients, far from being dumb, are some of the smartest people in the world because they are motivated, right? And they know when the clinician says, do you have any questions? They know what the right answer is. It's always no. What questions you have expresses curiosity. There isn't a kind of binary toggle switch to that. Okay, any other things? There's a reception, right, Deborah?
There is.
Can we drink the wine and talk? Let's just go drink the wine and talk.
Right in us. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Would
Yeah.
you like to remind everyone about HEX?
In
November?
Indeed, I would. Thank you for that spontaneous question. Just to let you guys know, and I even brought some flyers, over at UNC, we are having what we are calling and what we seriously plan to enact. Ooh, did I not bring them? Crap. Will you go online and pull up HEX, H-H-E-X, UNC, November. So anyway, there's a Health Humanities Exchange happening November 11th and November 12th at UNC-Chapel Hill. Get this. I mean, we always worry that anyone will show up to anything. We are doing this conference or exchange in a lovely, capacious location, but we are getting the instinct that too many people are interested, so we're moving to a slightly larger venue. Anyway, so if you could go to schedule, maybe? That's really interesting. Anyway, the point is we've got amazing keynote speakers at this HEX, and it really is an exchange. It's across UNC campus, healthcare people, philosophy people, occupational therapy people, grad students, educators, really interesting panels. So Sue Estroff, who is a personage, incredibly funny, interesting, quick on her feet. She's giving the closing keynote, and then if we go back, Michelle Rivkin-Fish, who's an incredible medical anthropologist. She's doing really interesting work on Russia and reproduction and women's health surrounding questions of abortion. She's giving a talk not on that, but I'm now spacing what her talk is on. But most exciting, perhaps, is our Saturday morning talk at HEX. This is for you. Over in the UK, there is a cool group that's been doing this improv stuff. It's called Performing Medicine. I met them this summer when Deborah and I were in London and Kim for any number of things. They are so cool. So we're bringing over the artistic director and the young woman staff person of Performing Medicine, who herself went through the King's College Medical Health and Society program, MA program. So this is all happening. It's free. If you sign up fairly quickly, we're getting too many people, so we can no longer do free dinner for all. But if you go to this website, there is a sign up, and all it asks you to do is, register, no money. I just think it's going to be truly an event. Deborah is speaking. Mary Foskett, head of the Humanities Center at Wake. So what we're trying to do is not just foster a thing within UNC, and not just the corridor, the ACC corridor, but North Carolina, because I I think that's what we should do, is think, what's our sphere of influence? Why not think about North Carolina, right? And let's beat Columbia and Emory, both of whom are doing this kind of stuff. Doesn't have to be a competition. Okay, now? Yeah, okay.
Can I get you to sign the form on your way out?
Yeah.